Today I'm sharing everything you need to know before you plan your fall garden. Let's go. Hey friends, it's Kendall, your joyful farmer. Today is July 2nd here in North Texas, and at this point it's a great time to start planning for a fall garden. There is such an emphasis on the spring and summer garden that fall gardening is often overlooked. It can really be a great time to have a garden. Many of us here in the southern United States have a climate that makes it really difficult to grow throughout the entire summer. What results is that we have a spring season to garden, and then we and our plants get hot and cranky as the temperatures get above 100 degrees or 38 degrees Celsius. But if we plan well, we can also use the fall to garden, and it can be a much more enjoyable experience than the summer. Temperatures start to cool off, pest pressure starts to taper off. Many of us can even get away with growing some plants during the entire winter. The first piece of information you really need to know is your estimated first frost date in the fall. Ours is November 12th. This date is really an approximation based on your area's history. It can come sooner or it can come later than that date. Like for us, the risk of frost really starts in October, but it's most likely that we will have our first frost by November 12th. A few years ago, our first frost date was actually in December, so that was kind of wild. So it's really an estimation. A great starting place to figure out when to plant certain crops in the fall based on your average first frost date is the Farmer's Almanac website. You can search for your zip code. The next thing you need to understand is that the days get progressively shorter in the fall, and what results is slower growth of plants as you get deeper into the fall and into the winter. So for example, if you're looking at growing a variety of cauliflower through November, you probably need an extra couple of weeks than what the days to maturity says on the packet for the cauliflower head to develop. If you live in the northern hemisphere, the further away you are from the equator, the shorter the days get in the winter. As a rule of thumb, vegetables that you grow in the winter are just going to grow more slowly. Another piece of information you need to know is the temperature tolerance of plants. There are frost tender annuals, frost tolerant plants, and cold hardy plants, and there's perennials. First, let me explain a little bit about frost tender plants. A frost tender plant is a plant that won't survive temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. When it's frozen, the water in the plant's foliage will freeze and then expand, and that causes the cells to rupture. These plants generally don't recover from that kind of damage unless the frost has only affected one part of the plant. These are plants like tomatoes, peppers, melons, cucumbers, squash, etc. Then there are frost-tolerant plants. Frost-tolerant plants can tolerate a light frost. They will generally bounce back after a light frost where the ice crystals form on the plants, and temperatures below 29 degrees Fahrenheit or -2 degrees Celsius will generally cause severe damage to the foliage. These are plants like carrots, beets, potatoes, and snap peas. In the case of root veggies like carrots or beets or potatoes, sometimes if the foliage of the plant freezes and dies, but the root doesn't, the root can actually help to develop more foliage and the plant will continue to grow. Frost-hardy plants will survive temperatures of 28 Fahrenheit or below or -2 degrees Celsius or below. Cauliflower, broccoli, radishes are some of these. There are some plants that will survive temperatures of 20 degrees Fahrenheit, -6 degrees Celsius, or even lower. Kale, garlic, and spinach will tolerate those super low temperatures and will typically survive all winter for us here in North Texas with little to no coverage. Speaking of coverage, another way to extend your fall growing season is by covering your plants. You can use clear plastic to create a greenhouse or cold frame effect over your plants during the day. You can also choose to cover plants only on cold nights. You can use frost fabric and hoops, create a blanket by piling up straw or hay covering the foliage of the plant. You can use Rubbermaid tubs or even bed sheets, blankets, comforters, cardboard boxes. But the goal here is to insulate the foliage and give them protection from the cold air outside. You might want to note that if the leaves are touching the sheets or the frost fabric, they're more likely to experience some damage. Then when the temperatures warm back up the next day, you can just uncover them. This gives you a great tool to use as you want to, so that if you want to keep your plants growing even through a freeze, you can do that. It works for all plants. You can really provide protection for any type of plant, a frost tender plant, a frost tolerant plant, or a cold hardy plant, and it will help extend your growing season. Okay, now with all that information, you can make educated decisions about what you might want to try to grow. There is always going to be some risk involved in gardening no matter what, but you can decide what sort of risks you want to take and what you're willing to try. I'm a gardener that likes to push boundaries and sometimes roll the dice. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always fun to keep trying and learning. So here's some advice to plan your approach to the fall garden. If your growing season is long enough, frost tender plants like peppers and tomatoes, which tend to stop producing in the summer, will start setting blooms and producing more fruit for you in the fall because the temperatures start to cool off again. For us, that's usually around mid-September. If you can help those plants survive the summer, a lot of times you will get a ton of tomatoes and peppers in the fall. You can also, especially with tomato plants, start fresh plants from seed in the middle of summer and plant them out so that you have a chance to get some fall fruit. Just pay attention to the days to maturity on the varieties so that you can plan to have enough time to grow them. Also, you can start a lot more plants that have shorter days to maturity, like certain summer squash, so zucchini, yellow scallop squash, or cucumbers, bush beans are some of the options that you can grow. So if, for example, I have 100 days left in my growing season, I know that I'm gonna have plenty of time to grow those varieties that have 55 to 65 days to maturity. Now, I don't want them to freeze before I have a chance to get food off of them, if I can help it. Something I've noticed about tomatoes and watermelons is that the fruit sometimes lacks in the flavor and the sugars that they typically would have in the summer months when you grow them in the fall. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, frost tolerant and cold hardy vegetables are just made for the fall garden. They are amazing. In fact, pretty much all of them actually have better flavor when the weather gets colder and if they go through a frost. And that's great news for us here in the southern US because our springs heat up really quickly, and the brassicas and lettuces and things, it gets too warm for them too fast, and so a lot of times they will get bitter and bolt or grow flowers. Another great thing about the cool weather vegetables is they really don't require as much maintenance as the warm weather stuff. There's really no pruning. The water needs are a lot lower. The pest pressure slows down. Cool weather crops also don't require frequent harvesting either. They're not like tomatoes that need to be harvested at just the right time, or cucumbers that you have to pick pretty much every day to make sure that they don't develop too much on the vine and cause your plant to quit on you. Now, some of these cool weather vegetables like brassicas, such as kale, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, I will start indoors or on a shaded porch kind of in the middle of July, and then I'll transplant them out around September when the weather cools off. And I also direct sow a lot of those cool weather veggies in September as well. And really, fall gardening is great because the weather's not 1,000 degrees outside anymore. You can just take a leisurely stroll through the garden on a nice crisp evening, gather a few kale leaves to use with dinner. It really can be quite the relief after gardening through a really hot summer and struggling with a lot of those summer challenges. But that doesn't mean that the fall garden is completely free of every difficulty. There are a couple of challenges that I've really come to anticipate, at least for me, with fall gardening. The first challenge in some cases, definitely the case here in North Texas, is pest pressure. Though pest populations shift and many of them become less active in the fall, in many cases there are still pests around in the fall that can damage especially the young plants. Here where I live in September, the grasshoppers and sometimes cucumber beetles are still running absolutely rampant. So when I go to transplant cool weather veggies in September, I have to make sure that they're protected from grasshoppers that can eat them in 10 seconds. Another challenge is seed starting. Now, if you have indoor seed starting down, it can be a great activity that you can do indoors in the air conditioning to help give you hope to get you through the rest of the summer where you're taking care of baby plants and enjoying yourself. In my area, many of the cold weather seeds can be started in July and August. I'll actually link my personal seed starting calendar in the description below this video. And the Farmer's Almanac, like I was saying, is also a great resource to look up that information for your area, or you can just do a web search for a planting calendar in your area. Or contact your area's Ag Extension office, and they are a great resource as well. This year I'm actually choosing a lot of varieties that have shorter days to harvest so that I can hopefully get a quicker harvest from my fall crops. I do have another video where I'm going to be sharing my favorite varieties of cool weather veggies to grow, as well as the ones that I'm trying this year that are shorter days to harvest that I'm really excited about. Starting seeds outdoors this time of year is a little bit more difficult just because there's more room for error when it comes to watering. The sun and the heat will cause the water to evaporate and dry out your plants really quickly if you're not careful. And then the pest pressure can also be something that you battle as well. But it's the method that I generally prefer to start seeds outdoors. So this year I'm actually going to let my brassicas and cool weather veggies germinate indoors, and then I'm going to pop them outside onto the porch and make sure they're covered and protected and in a good watering situation so that the grasshoppers can't get them. I tested out a method with a kiddie pool in the shade, and I think it's going to work great for this. Now, the crops that prefer to be direct sown, so like peas, carrots, radishes, lettuce, spinach, arugula, and things like that, those I will direct sow as soon as I see the heat breaking in September. So for us here in North Texas, as soon as the highs get to be in the 80s or lower during the day, that's when I'll start to direct sow those. But really, the fall garden is pretty easy and fun and very laid back as long as you have a decent plan, a trusted planting calendar, making sure to plan around your frost date. And the only real effort is to get those seeds started and make sure the transplants and direct sown plants can survive the insects and heat so that they can be mature and get established. But after that, the fall garden can be such an easy coast. And then you just have to keep an eye out for when your first frost is going to come and decide whether you want to cover your plants and protect them or not. So if you haven't tried it, you really may want to experience the joy and the slower pace of the fall garden. Thanks so much for watching. I wish you joy on your journey, and I'll see you next time.